Good evening, everyone. How many people out there own a cell phone, or should I call it a smartphone? Now, think for a second if your cell phone or smartphone just poof ceased to exist. And I know if that happened to me, I'd feel pretty lost. Almost like I lost like an extended limb or something that I've just grown accustomed to having and pretty attached to. Hi, I'm Dante Alexander, and today I'm here to talk to you about the evolution of the cell phone. To do that, I'm going to look at three key factors that are relevant to the evolution of the cell phone. The first being early commercially used cell phones. The second being how cell phones have changed and advanced over time. And the third and last being where the cell phone is as we know it today. I have a picture for you, if you can see it. How many people remember that? Zach Morris on his from Saved by the Bell on his brick gray cell phone that he used to carry around. According to an article by AI Insight, phones like this were the first phones that were small enough to be considered truly portable phones. And even though cell phones have been around for about 40 years and the technology for them has been around even longer than that, something like 70 years, the early cell phones were far too big and cumbersome to be carried around and used in daily, everyday use. In fact, the majority of them were really intended to just be mobile phones that you used in the car or some kind of vehicle. And the phones were also a far cry from what they are today. For starters, the first cell phone, that Dynatech that I mentioned, cost $3,995. Almost $4,000 for a cell phone. And obviously it was very big and weighed nearly 2 pounds. So it was obviously not a phone that you were going to stick in your pocket or in your purse and carry it around. And then one of the biggest things that made that phone different from the phones of today is they only had one function. Two, depending on how you want to look at it. And that was to receive and place phone calls. And not only that, it took 10 hours to charge the phone. And you only got 1 hour of talk time out of that. So now that I've refreshed everyone's memory on early commercially used cell phones, let's move forward a few years and look at how cell phones have changed and advanced over time. Now, the cell phones obviously grew in demand. The demand for cell phones and the popularity of cell phones, it grew, and the technology began to advance as well. And so did the design of the phone. According to an article by Business Insider, it was around the late 80s, early 90s, that the carriers began using the 2G or second generation digital networks. Now on these 2G networks, it allowed you a more secure phone call and also a higher quality call where you could get better reception and you could hear the person that you were talking to a lot better. And another important factor of these 2G or second generation networks was that it allowed you to transmit text and other data, such as emails, and eventually you were able to use the internet on your phone. And initial use of the text wasn't very widely used, and one of the reasons was probably because most phones didn't have a QWERTY keyboard at that time with the letters and everything. You pretty much were restricted to just using the number pad, and that could be kind of cumbersome doing that. So a lot of people didn't send text back then. But it's just important to point out that this was the beginning of text. And today, texting is actually the biggest data service used on cell phones. As later cell phones came out, like the Palm and the BlackBerry, they also allowed you to not only send out text, but you could also send email and things like that. And you started seeing a lot of business people and things like that using these types of phones. And as time progressed on, cell phones became a little bit smaller, they became more sleeker and a little bit more stylish. And it was around this time that the cell phone maker Nokia became known as the king of the cell phone. And they started offering cell phones like this with colorful shells and more personalized to the person that was using it. And they also were one of the first cell phone makers to have a phone with a color LCD display. Now that we've journeyed back in and we've looked at early commercially used cell phones, and we've talked about how the cell phone has changed and advanced over time, let's move forward to the modern day and look at what the cell phone is as we know it today. Now, with the introduction of the 3G or third generation networks, phones could transmit data at really high speeds, high broadband speeds, and you began to see phones that were able to use had like a watered down or text version of the internet, and eventually they came to what we know today, where they have the full internet. It was probably the Apple, or undoubtedly it was the Apple iPhone that pretty much changed the game on the smartphone. It was the first phone with the touch screen, and it just has further advanced over the years, where it's up to its sixth generation now. I believe it's the iPhone 5S. Uh, and the new iPhones, they have features like camera. They have the popular Siri assistant on it, and the functions of the phone are just endless. And although the iPhone was the innovator and was the first, there are just an array of phones out there that offer similar features. Probably their biggest competitor would be Samsung in the Galaxy line of phones that it has. And the phone itself can do things from controlling your TV. If you don't have your remote control, you could use the phone for a remote control. You can do hand gestures to where you don't even have to touch the phone to make it do something.